What is up, guys? You got NotTheWorst here, bringing another Black Desert online video, and today we are revisiting the Dark Knight Succession Endgame PvE Guide. The class did recently get some pretty hefty damage buffs added onto it, including a 30% damage buff on Wheel of Fortune, which is a very big deal. Couple of skill tweaks as well, so about time we get an updated guide. Before we jump in to the new updates and Lightstones and all that, I did want to mention currently Pearl Abyss is running a sponsorship with my channel. So if you are thinking about purchasing a coin or subsequently pearls and you are using the web client version, not Steam users, this will not work for you guys. When you are purchasing that a coin, you will see a box come up from now until August 12th. And you can help support your favorite content creator by entering their code. So mine is NTW. So if you're purchasing some A-Coin and pearls there, just pop that NTW code in there and Pearl Abyss hooks me up with a percentage of the coin purchase that you make. So rather than feeding it to them, maybe give me a little bit if you don't mind, because I need it, so please help me. Yeah, so anyways, just a nice free way. You still get, if you're already going to purchase the pearls anyways, free way to help support your favorite content creator. So yeah, please use that code if you are interested, and if not, hey, I get it, no big deal. No hard feelings, but that does run from the time this video is posted up until August 12th. If you are viewing this after that time, it is likely no longer running. So with the sellout mode out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into Lightstones and talk about that. Okay, so for Lightstone sets with Succession Dark Knight, to be quite honest with you, if we're talking endgame PvE, the best in slot is not negotiable. For this class, it is Deathblow, and it's absolutely not close to other ones. There are other alternatives if you don't have that or don't want to try and obtain 2 Bladestones on your server. Maybe you're just trying the class out, or maybe they're not available on your server or just not in the price for you at the time. That's fine. We'll talk about some other options as well, but if you want raw damage output and the best numbers possible, it's going to be Deathblow every time. The reason for that is it gives you access to 100% crit rate on some very key skills that you normally would not have 100% crit rate. A lot of times the conjecture here comes up that, oh, 98% is good enough. I'd rather have my Lightstones fill something else. No, leaving that 2% critical hit rate on some of these skills is not smart. And in some cases, like Wheel of Fortune, you're talking about 88% crit rate, which is miserable because that skill is an absolute monstrosity now that it has its base damage buffed, so you want that to crit every single time. Running the Deathblow set gives you 100% crit rate on Wheel, Airstrike, Pervasive, Ravage Rake, and Twilight Dash. That would not normally. Those are all going to have 88 to 98% critical hit rate. That is because, unfortunately, Dark Knight does not have very good access to Tier 3 add-ons, so she cannot get critical hit rate plus 30% in most scenarios. And if you're deciding to run Corrupt Ground in the skill add-ons, which you'll see later we are not, you're only going to have that up every 20 seconds because it's an insanely long cooldown. It's your only Tier 3 add-on, so it's super, super inconsistent for trying to maintain critical hit rate. So for these reasons, we want to run Deathblow if it is possible. If that's not the case, and maybe you have several characters you're bouncing around, you might have Vicious Shadows, which is a great option. That Predation, Shadow Strike is fairly expensive when you're talking about 2 blades or 1 Shadows and 1 Strike. It's roughly the same cost, obviously server dependent here. This is going to give you additional back attack damage 6% and critical hit damage plus 3%. Obviously, damage modifiers are excellent choices for areas where you're hitting AP cap, especially if we're talking about Hex or the Trolls, since the AP caps there are 5% restrictive. This is still an insanely good choice for Gyfin, where you only have a 70% AP cap because of that additional back attack damage. Gyfin's somewhat unique because of how the monsters interact, in that you're getting 100% back attacks when you're playing there. So this is a really, really strong option. You will see this not be as large of a deficit running this at Gyfin rather than Deathblow. However, Deathblow is still the better choice between those two. Some other options or honorable mentions that we do have. Target openings is always a good all-around choice if you just happen to have that. Honestly, if you've got the Strike Stone, maybe just make the effort to swap over to Vicious Shadows. But if you do have it and you're just in that position, again, maybe you're just trying this out, then that's fine. A couple of honorable mentions for just kind of cheap options to fill in the blanks. to just kind of use wherever without committing much is Trained Fist or Enhanced Focus. You can just grab these right off the marketplace for virtually nothing. You may even have these Lightstones just sitting around, and they've got some decent all-around stats. Trained Fist leaning a little bit more into the AP, whereas Enhanced Focus is leaning a little bit more into the accuracy. A place like Hex, rather than Gyphon, really has a pretty high accuracy requirement, so if your gear's a little subpar, we need to make sure you're hitting 100% hit rate. Don't want to invest in some more expensive Lightstones. Enhanced Focus is a great option here to pick up 24 accuracy, which is pretty significant increase to your hit rate and should help you out quite a bit to fill in the gaps for some of your other gear. So with that covered, let's go ahead and jump on over to the crystals and talk about our different options here. All right, for crystal sets, I've got 3 sets for you that we are going to take a look at and kind of dissect what we're looking at for each one. The first one's going to be our general PvE crystal set. Now, this crystal set is basically set for the player that doesn't want to be bothered with worrying about what your hit rate is, calculating any of that out, your AP cap, or any of that nonsense. You just want a general, all-around usage, going to be good in PvE for whatever grind zones you're running at, and you don't care if you have a trillion AP over the AP cap or if your hit rate is 160%. It's irrelevant to you. You just want to make sure everything's good. So pretty basic with this setup. We have Crystal Elcars and Vipers for our accuracy rates in here, and then we have, of course, the Okrads for additional attack speed, some monster damage in there. We max out our crit rate while we're running Frenzy Drafts by having 2 Dark Red Fang crystals, and they also provide a little bit more AP there as well. The newer Crystal of Brutal Decimation gives us some additional back attack damage, which is pretty sweet, alongside some monster damage there as well. Of course, Rebellious Spirit Crystal you're going to see in every setup for PvE because they're just insane all-around stats. And then in this slot, we have a Gihren's Crystal. Ideally, you'd want this to eventually be a Gihren's Tier, one of the new primordial crystals. Obviously, obtaining those is going to take you some time, several weeks of running your boss shrine, so I personally don't have a tier at the time that DK got these buffs, so we're running a crystal. In the meantime, it's just going to take a little while till you can upgrade those, or you just get insanely lucky out of one of your boxes, or you win the lottery off of a pre-order. But obviously, the Gihren's Tier is going to be a little bit nicer. You can see we do have the 1 power crystal put in there just for a little bit of additional AP. We end up with a single slot kind of open, thanks to the effects of the primordial crystals, making it somewhat uneven. So just an additional extra little bit of damage. The next set we're going to talk about is for the player that does care about what their hit rate and their AP amounts are. So this is what we'll call the try-hard build, and this is going to be somewhat altered based on your gear. Why is that? Because you need to determine that you have 100% hit rate first of all. And if you have 100% hit rate at that spot, then you want to focus on making sure you're hitting AP caps. If we're talking about Hex or Trolls, they have a very restrictive 5% AP cap. So once you hit that AP cap, we don't want to focus on damage there. We want to look for additional damage modifiers, ways to increase our damage that are not additional AP. So in that sense, what we're doing with this is we are then running, of course, the Gihren's Crystal, and then we've got 2 Aulicus crystals put in here for an additional 1% attack speed. And the reason we run these over the decimations is if we're talking about like Hex, getting 1% back attack damage is going to be worse than 1% attack speed. The only exception to that is if you find that you do need the additional 7 monster damage off of a decimation. You could certainly swap out that Aulicus for a decimation, just depends on your gear. In my case, it's superfluous. The monster damage does nothing, and I want that attack speed over the back attack every single time. You then see we've got a set of the Ultimate Whoms. These crystals are just honestly godly compared to even previous Whoms. They have such heavy defensive stats that are a really nice gain in PvE. It's kind of a scenario where our offensive pressure at higher end grind zones is increased by having a better defensive presence. It's a huge HP boost, a huge DR boost. It does have a little accuracy to juice you up a little bit if you need it, and allows you to reduce having an additional accuracy crystal, any additional accuracy crystals if you need them, dependent on your gear. Something else to mention here, talking about accuracy, you'll see that I have 1 Viper crystal in here. Honestly, in my gear, I do not need that. I can hit a 100% hit rate at Hex without it, so that could be swapped out for a Decimation crystal potentially to pick up that 1% back attack damage if you wanted to. You could go with a defensive option like a Bitterness crystal or something like that to give you a little more breathing room at Hex, and maybe not having to worry about getting a skeleton to blow up on you or one-shot at Gyphon or something like that. if those are relevant, but that can definitely be swapped out if you choose to. The reason I'm running one of these is my tag is currently Awakening Megu, and although DK on my gear has 100% hit rate at Hex, she actually doesn't. So I just keep it easy to have the crystal set up there. You may need it there, and you may even consider dropping an additional Olicus for Viper if you're short on accuracy. Obviously, Vipers give you the best bang for your buck on accuracy. The last set I want to talk about, why I didn't mention too much of an interaction with the tryhard set on Gyfin, is because we've got a separate set for Gyfin. There's one caveat to this. We can see that I'm running the regular Macalods. We're going to make believe magic pretend those are ultimate Macalods, because the point here is Gyfin has a 70% AP cap, so overstacking beyond the AP cap is still somewhat beneficial to you, unlike the Elvia zones where it's incredibly restrictive. So in this scenario, if those were ultimate Macalods, I believe we get a 22 AP bonus out of running all 4, versus we could just be running 4 power crystals and get 20 AP bonus. Obviously, we don't get the stamina or accuracy, but at a spot like Gyfin, we don't really need that. We certainly aren't going to need the stamina since you're moving from just elite pack 3 times over. So yeah, anyways, those should be ultimates. If you don't have the ultimates like I don't currently, and you want to run this Gyfin set, you could just swap those for power crystals if you wanted to, and be totally fine. But the ultimate Macalods are what the total goal there. Of course, Rebellious is always going to be running here. Then you see something interesting where we have corrupted crystals, typically best in slot for everything pretty much always. One of the new crystals, the crystals of Mysterious Darkness, provide 12% back attack damage each, which can sound really enticing. However, the corrupted crystals are going to be better in any scenario that you're not 100% back attacking, which is most grind zones. However, Gyfin is not most grind zones. You are going to be 100% back attacking, or virtually 100% back attacking when you're at Gyfin, and these will outscale the corrupted crystals by a decent amount. You'll note that your trash loot on this increases pretty significantly. These crystals are extremely powerful for that zone and can really, really stretch out what you're capable of doing at Gyfin. It also goes without saying those can be paired really well with the Brutal Decimation crystals we kind of saw sprinkled into the other 2 builds. Again, additional back attack damage on these, another 2% on it, and then we're getting 14 monster damage between the both of them on there. Here we have Olicus and Alcrad again. Again, Alcrads are just always going to be in a PvE setup, and Olicus for the additional attack speed, 4 more modifiers. If you're not happy with the attack speed, no offense, but you're probably wrong. But if you really don't like it, you can always swap those out for power crystals to just get more AP. Personally, I'll take 2% attack speed over another 10 AP that's capped for only an additional gain of 7 AP, but your mileage may vary on that. Then something interesting that gives us the kind of one slot. There's only one Dark Red Fang crystal. I know what you're saying. Not the worst. I'm not hitting 100 my max critical hit here, so I'm affecting my critical hit rate. Well, because we are back attacking and we have all these wild back attack damage amounts here, you can run a Giant's Draft to give you maximum crit rate with just 1 Red Fang crystal, freeing up an additional crystal slot for you so that you can run all these other additional modifiers. The difference between the Giant's Draft and the Frenzy Draft is virtually the same. The Frenzy Draft might slightly edge it out, but I don't know that you're going to see much of a real world difference. And then when you're getting to pick up an additional Brutal Decimation crystal for it, it's going to make up for that difference. So we still get our max critical hit rate with just the 1 Dark Red Fang crystal, since we are running a Giants over Frenzy for it. And then lastly, of course, always in PvE, you're going to be running that Gearins. Again, if you have a tier, definitely run the tier. It's strictly better, but for now, we're running Crystal because it's all we have until we win the RNG Lotto. So there you have it for the Crystal setups. Let's go ahead and get in talking about the add-ons and see how that's going to tie in with our skill rotation as well. All right, here we have our skill add-ons that I'm currently running. As I always say in these PvE guides, I'm going to mention again, your skill add-ons should be tying in with your skill rotation. So this is a great outline for you. You can take this and use it, and the same with the skill rotation. And over time, as you want to kind of make those things your own, make sure as you're adjusting your skill rotation, your add-ons make sense to adjust that as well. What do I mean by that? It's not as important in Succession DK since we're dealing with mostly tier 2 across the board, but in scenarios where on other classes you might have a tier 3, or maybe you want to be cheeky and you've decided to slash in Corrupt Ground for a tier 3, your tier 2s are not going to overwrite your tier 3 add-on, so you could be hurting yourself with not having an add-on put in there. In addition to that, if your skill rotation's lasting longer than 7 seconds, it's twice as long as I last, but that's besides the point, you're not going to have just one skill add-on for one specific skill and expect it to work for the entirety of the rotation. So we want to make sure that they're getting refreshed regularly. So just keep that in mind as we go over these. You want to have your skill add-ons match your skill rotation. So if you decide to change the add-ons, make sure the rotation reflects that, and vice versa. If you change the rotation, make sure the add-ons are reflecting that as well. This is pretty straightforward. We just look to maintain the very key elements in PvE. That is going to be your monster damage if you need it. Obviously, it's relevant at Gyphon virtually at all times since the AP cap's not as restricted there. But in Elvia, I actually do not need the 20 monster damage. I hit the cap without that. So that could be swapped out for something else. We're using it here. I just generally leave it on 1. So when I'm switching to my tag class, it's still relevant. To remember to keep my monster damage up, and to demonstrative purposes, most people will need the 20 monster damage on there. So you don't have to have it if your gear is better than mine. If it's not, you probably want to have that on there so that you're easily hitting the cap. And if you're at Gyphon, you don't have to switch your add-ons for Gyphon because you still have it on there and it matters. Critical hit rate, obviously extremely important on DK, like we talked about in the Lightstone section. She has several very key skills that are very high damage. We want to make sure we're hitting 100% critical hit rate, so that needs to be up at all times. And then accuracy rate, again, your mileage may vary on if you need that. We have that and an evasion shred as well, which can be helpful at Hex if your hit rate is a bit under. Again, you'll need to calculate out to see what you're at and if those actually matter. As far as the evasion shred skill and the DP, I know typically you're used to seeing the DP debuff used on Spirit Legacy because it has its own skill DP debuff. So you get a 20 from the skill and an additional 15 off of the skill add-on, which is great, 35 DP debuff. Now, the reason we put this on Wheel, however, and the evasion shred on that skill as well, you have to keep in mind that debuff skill add-ons need to hit each individual mob to apply, whereas buff skills do not. What do I mean by that? If I use a Spirit Legacy, I'm at Hex. When you're grinding at Hex, a lot of the mobs are kind of still coming towards you as you're kind of killing them almost in waves in some scenarios because they get very, very dense packs. There's also scenarios where you have extra mobs spawned from the Soul Harvester event guy that's on there, and you actually can't damage all the mobs at the same time because there is a limit on the number of mobs that your skills will hit. That being the case, you want to have a low cooldown with wide AoE to apply the debuffs. I only need to hit one mob with a Spirit Legacy to get my monster damage and my accuracy rate buff applied on me. Hitting any one mob will apply that buff. If I hit one mob with a DP debuff and an evasion shred debuff, only that one mob has the DP debuff and the evasion shred debuff on it as well. So in this scenario, we like to use those on Wheel. It has much better AoE range, but it's also all around you. So the mobs don't all necessarily need to be grouped up like they would with Legacy directly in front of you within a short AoE area. They can be anywhere around you. You get a little bit better coverage, some better mileage usage, especially out of that DP debuff, because it's likely you don't necessarily need the evasion rate. It's just a nice to have, and a little bit better for the boss spawn events as well, because they do have much higher evasion than the regular mobs there. The other things are pretty straightforward. We do put back attack and critical hit damage on pervasive. That is because of where it's used in the skill rotation. We're going to be setting up resetting our positioning for guaranteed back attacks at that point. And then we have Ravage Rake with critical hit and attack speed coming up again, once again, because when we get to that point in the rotation, you will see that we need to refresh those buffs, and that also gives Ravage Rake 100% critical hit rate, making sure that we have another rate on there. So fairly straightforward with these, just a couple things out of the ordinary with that Legacy DP going on to Wheel from what you're used to seeing, but other than that, nothing completely mind-blowing was really changed with these buffs, so it is virtually the same. So let's go ahead and get into the skill rotation and see how these all are going to tie in. All right, so let's get the skill rotations up on the screen. And whether you're on console or PC, I got you covered. We've got one with the skill names and icons on the left, if that's easier for you. And for the PC bros that can't be bothered to learn skill names, we've got skill inputs with the skill icons on the right-hand side as well. So it is easy for you to get the rotation however you want. If that's all you're looking for, there you go. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next video. If you would like demonstration on it, we're going to go through the skills here and kind of talk about each one and why we're using them. So the first setup is pretty straightforward. It's just a great engage with awesome damage. Gets our initial add-ons going, and it moves you from pack to pack really well. Twilight Dash into Comma Slash has been a staple for the past year since it was first introduced, the interaction. So we're just going to lead with that, get great damage right out of the gate. and begin jumping into the rest of it. Now, something to note, and you'll see that I just did it there, the Blooming Black Rose skill was recently changed so that it has a quick cast interaction with a couple of skills that it didn't before. It now can be quick casted after Comma Slash, which you'll just see I did there because I held RMB, which is not what we're necessarily going to do each time. It can also happen after Legacy, which, as you can see, is where we're going to be using it in this scenario. There was also a change to where Ravage Rake then engages very quickly after Blooming Black Rose, so you could potentially do the Legacy into it and then go directly into Ravage Rake, and you can see that's very fast. You'll note that I don't use that in this skill rotation. The reason for that, although I do like the speed of it and it does appear to be extremely useful there, is in actuality the length of time that you're doing that, and because of how long Ravage Rake's skill is, since it's functionally 4 hits that are being applied, by the time you get to the Ravage Rake transition, unless you're at Gyphant, you're probably getting all frontal attacks by doing that. So I didn't particularly care for that interaction when actually using it. I prefer to keep Ravage Rake after Nocturne because you're going to teleport behind the mobs and get all back attacks on that. So what am I talking about? If we Legacy, Blooming Black Rose, and then Ravage Rake, all of that has to be done without changing our positioning, and none of those skills change our positioning. So like I said, by the time you finish that Ravage Rake chain, you're just all frontal, all frontal, all frontal, and you're leaving a lot of damage on the table, in my opinion. So that's why we're not touching that. Anyways, moving on. So we're going to Twilight Dash into Comma Slash. Then we're just going to use Airstrike into the Flow Vidir Strike. And that's going to put you directly behind the mobs. You're going to then spin around. Unveiled Dagger to get your 10% attack speed. This was buffed so that this has a 10-second duration instead of 5 seconds now. So it's really, really nice in that regard, and it only has a 5-second cooldown, so you can keep this up very, very easily. Then we're just going to Slanted Balance into a quick Spirit Legacy, and then use the Blooming Black Rose new skill very quickly. Right after that, we'll go into Wheel of Fortune, so we've got all our DP debuffs up, and then from here, we want to reposition. We're going to reapply our Unveiled Dagger and go into Pervasive with the Flow, and then Enforcement with the Flow as well. Lunacy of Vidir, hold that RMB if you're on PC so that you can get your Nocturne kick. You'll get behind the mobs if you're actually targeting a mob from that point, and then you clean up with Ravage Rake, which was also getting a damage buff, so it hits very, very nicely. So that's kind of one by one each of the skills there with some explanations on it. I'll go ahead and just kind of go through the combo. This is designed so that you can rinse and repeat. You just go from top to bottom, and then you can go right back to the top, and your cooldowns will be back up for you. You can kind of mix and match a little bit as you get more comfortable with this. You can start to give things more priority, like using Wheel of Fortune every time it's off of cooldown. Can really increase your DPS, but if you're just kind of getting used to it, or at least trying to get familiar with an outline for a skill rotation, then this is a really great way to do that. So the full skill rotation, obviously we won't teleport after Nocturne because we don't have a target. We'll go like this. There you go. And then you can just do it all over again. All your cooldowns will be up for you very nicely, laying out maximum amount of damage that you can with the setup that you've got. Very, very simple. Practice that a little bit, and you'll get pretty used to it. So you can just do it kind of autopilot. And then, like I said, as you get more comfortable, you can kind of mix and match and give some skills more priority as they come off cooldown. Really notable is that Wheel of Fortune giving that priority as it comes up, and being comfortable with the rotation so you can move that skill around whenever it's off CD is really going to continue to increase what you can perform as far as trash per hour goes. So that's gonna be it for this video. I'm gonna send you out with the demo of me grinding at Hex, so you can just kind of see the actual skills in use versus just hitting air for a little while. So if you did enjoy the video, be sure to like it. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you get notifications when new videos go live. And if you'd like to catch me playing live, there's a link to my Twitch page in the description down below. Jump on over there, drop a follow so you get notifications for that as well. And don't forget about the event running until August 12th. If you're going to be purchasing any pearls and you're not on the Steam version, then please use the coupon code NTW when you check out for the A coin to purchase those pearls, and Pearl Abyss will be giving me a percentage of that sale rather than keeping it all to themselves. So great way to help me out if you are going to be buying pearls. Anyways, with that said, that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.